And I started researching the area, and I came across a wonderful app called Moshi Mindfulness that gave bedtime stories. And my kids started listening to those stories. And from the first story, my daughter fell asleep within 15 minutes. It's then that researching mindfulness became one of my topics. And I'm very, very happy that I had this chance to be MESAL program, a part of MESAL program where I started my research. Thank you, Dr. C, for this amazing program, and I'll begin. Why mindfulness? There's several research that proves that mindfulness improves emotion regulation, increases self-awareness, lowers reactivity of amygdala, reduces anxiety, stress, depression. It ensures quick recovery from pain, increases confidence, boosts the immune system, significantly increases concentration, ability to relax, improves sleep, and decreases job burnout. What we need, right? Why mindfulness in school? We know that for some students, school is the only place they can feel safe. And at the same time, there are other students for whom the school becomes the source of anxiety, depression, extreme stress. Today, one in 3 students faces adversity before turning the age of 18. And there is an increase in suicide, self-inflicted harm, and aggressive and impulsive behaviors. There is a lack of professional staff in schools, and not all schools can address this problem and ensure emotional well-being of students. And as we can see from my here I show the student to counselor ratio, and as you can see, the American School Counselor Association recommended ratio is 250 to 1. The new national ratio is 424 to 1. And as I was implementing my research in Chicago, I also brought here the data from Illinois. So the ratio of counselors per student students per counselor are 592 to 1. Out of over 30 names in my literary review, I want to stop on a couple of them. So first, John Kabat-Zinn. So John Kabat-Zinn is professor of medicine. He conceptualized mindfulness, and because he drew from both scientific and Buddhist traditions, his work was accepted by the scientific world. In 1970s, he created the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I want to stop on is Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman actually was the person who suggested including mindfulness together with SEL in schools as the right way to promote self-awareness along with emotion regulation. Next named, my favorite is Paul Ekman and His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama. With support from His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, Paul Ekman created the Atlas of Emotion, and he suggested everyone to engage with this tool and to understand the depth of human emotions and to incorporate it in everyday life. And finally, my biggest inspiration was the book written by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey titled What Happened to You, that addresses trauma nowadays. According to Paul Ekman, emotions unfold on a timeline. The timeline begins with a trigger, with precondition and trigger, and eventually ends with a reaction and a response to the trigger. There is a very short pause between the trigger and response to it. And so my assumption was that if we teach preschoolers to practice mindfulness on a daily basis, we could teach them actually to use that short segment of time between the trigger and response to it to stop, breathe, think, and make the right choice, make the safe choice. The question of my action research was, how can daily mindfulness practices impact inhibitory control in preschoolers? And to start addressing the question, I researched 3 mindfulness curriculums for preschoolers. First was Mind Up curriculum, mindfulness in the classroom, and peace of mind. I truly believe that it's never too early to start teaching the topic. It all depends on how you teach it. That's why I chose these 4 topics for my implementation in the classroom. First was Introduction to Human Brain. Thank you, Dr. Bertrando, for this amazing foundation that I got. Introduction to Mindfulness, the science behind emotions, and basic emotions and coping techniques. Talking about basic emotions, when we talk to kids about their emotions, they usually are able to identify angry or sad, sometimes happy, but I also made an attempt to introduce them to frustration. Here are the segments of time that I implemented mindfulness in the classroom. First was morning circles. During morning circles, I suggested students color the I feel activity. They were supposed to choose the emotion they brought that day to school, color it, and then in the morning circle, discuss the why behind that emotion, what created that emotion. And then the whole group would discuss how we can help our friends with unpleasant emotions to cope with them. What can we do on our part? And our morning circle would end with exercise, physical exercise with guided breathing. Second segment of time was story time. We read books. Here I also incorporated Alien Z stories from Harmony SEL. Then we learned how to take perspectives, how we feel, how the person in the story felt. What was one time we felt that way, where in our body we felt that, and how could we help the character to cope with that feeling, how we would like to be helped. And again, the story time would end with guided breathing. Next segment was small groups and centers. Here, I usually circulated between the centers to take anecdotal notes, field notes, and one of the centers always had activities that were connected with the story we read. Here we can see that we read Piggy and Elephant, and we did an activity with sad and angry piggies. There was the Angry Bee story where his friends helped him to become yellow, and kids chose their color of the bee, whether they felt angry or happy, and decorated it. Finally, the transition. During transitions, because these are little kids and they want some magic in their life, I suggested them choosing one magical creature that they wanted to hold in their palms. They would hold it, it would be sleeping, and they would breathe and walk slowly from one location to another, so the magical creature would not wake up. They would breathe slowly, and it was also guided breathing. One thing that I want to talk about is the emotion recognition activity. This was one of my favorites and my kiddos' favorites. I used pre-cut faces from different magazines, newspapers, and each child got 3 to 4 faces, and they were supposed to choose whether they were feeling have pleasant or unpleasant emotions. Here I was trying to teach them that there is no good or bad emotion. They can be pleasant or unpleasant, but all emotions are valid. They cannot be good or bad. So this person is using pleasant emotions, this person is using unpleasant emotions, and the kids would use glue to glue the face in corresponding column. For analysis, assessment, and measurement, here are the things that I used, measures that I used. First, emotion recognition. For emotion recognition, I used the emotional cards, I feel activity that I also spoke about, and observational and anecdotal notes. For self-awareness, I used prediction of actions and prediction of feelings cards that I created. Prediction of actions looked like this. The child would be asked a question. How would you feel if somebody pushed you, for example? They would choose angry, frustrated, or sad. And when they chose the emotion that they would feel, the second question would be, what would you do if someone pushes you? And the child would choose, I will push him back, I will take a breath and tell him to stop, I will tell an adult, or I will go away. I here actually had a student who the first time, yes, 1 minute, who the first time said, I would go away. Then we had all the implementation, and by the end, when I did this activity again, he said, Ms. Jasmine, you know, I know that it's right to take a breath, step away, tell the adult, but I think I would just go away. Here is my prediction of feelings. I'll rush forward. My main measurement tool was HTKS test. It's a head, toes, knees, and shoulders task, where it's a valid task that is translated into over 20 languages and is widely used all over the world. And here is the result that I received for emotion recognition. We see that the kids' ability to recognize and name their emotions increased. And here the most important thing was for me to say I feel instead of I am, because when we feel, we observe it from outside and we can choose the coping method. But if we identify ourselves with the emotion, we are locked. We cannot do anything with who we are. That's why I modeled I feel expression, and I noticed that about the 3rd week of implementation, kids started using I feel instead of I am when they came into the classroom. How much time do I have for the HTKS test? You can, I'm done.
Yes, go ahead and wrap it up.
We had 55% growth in inhibitory control, which was tremendous for me because there was this enigma up to the end of the implementation. I didn't know how I would end up. And my research showed that mindfulness did really impact the inhibitory control in a positive way.
Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. We are going to save our questions after our discussant has a chance to wrap everything up. Thank you very much, Hasmik. For those of you who have not seen her study before, it is very detailed in terms of the data that she collected, not only from the students, but also from the teacher and who was the main teacher. So thank you again, Hasmik. We now go ahead and stop sharing. Thank you. We now have Stacy Howard, who is an SEL specialist at Bixby School in Colorado. And she's going to be telling us about cooperative learning skills and movement. So what effect do they have on 5th grade students' interpersonal and conflict resolution skills? Go ahead and stop sharing, Hasmik. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dr. C. Everybody hear me okay? Okay. Thanks for having me. I am also a recent graduate. I just graduated in January from the National U program there in social emotional learning, and it was an amazing experience. I would recommend it to anyone. I've already had a chance to put a lot of that stuff to work, that knowledge to work, and it's exciting to stay a part of things. And I appreciate Dr. C helping me have this opportunity today. So my background is that I was a physical education teacher in Montessori, and when I stepped into SEL and had a chance to do an action research project, I knew it had to be around movement of some kind. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen here. This is kind of where I landed, that I wanted to look at what cooperative learning does, and if I couple it with movement, can we affect fifth graders and their kind of social awareness? I did this project at the beginning of the year, this school year, and it was my first year at Bixby, which is, again, I'll talk a little bit later about limitations, but that was one of them. It's a quick study. It's about 6 weeks. So they go fast, and this is mine. So let's see. Let's just go for it here. So before we really get looking, are you guys, can you see there? Is that better? Okay. Before we begin to look at this project in super detail, I want to stress, what research has shown about academics and mental well-being of students being affected by the COVID pandemic, and the role of schools in social emotional learning, and how much of a research topic those things are. That research has really shown the importance of school environments and SEL and what they play in kids' academic and emotional success at schools. So this action research project is a story of a 6-week study of fifth grade students and their work with collaborative learning and movement, and the effects it had on their abilities to contribute to a more effective climate of learning at their school. So here's where we started. I had a group of 20 fifth grade students. This is a small independent private school in Boulder, who'd been through the pandemic as third and fourth graders, where despite being in person at school, they lost really 2 years of practice on the very social and emotional skills we were asking them to reflect on and ultimately to improve on. So during the study, they were split into 2 cohorts at school, 10 students each, which immediately kind of cuts their social bank in half. And I think that can be frustrating on a lot of levels for the students and the teachers. I worked with them for about 45 minutes a week, each cohort. I had a movement and SEL class with them. We played cooperative games and really moved our bodies in mindful and purposeful ways to really stimulate both sides of the brain and get lots of neurons firing. About 4 weeks into the study, administration switched up the cohorts, which didn't help our study in any way. So I decided to go ahead and just study the students as a group, as a whole 20 students, and not try and break them down as cohorts or as individual students. It was just too hard given the changes that were being made. And really what we came to after 6 weeks of study and interventions was that this group really simply wasn't ready for this level of cooperative learning and the reflection that we were asking them to do based on their current social and emotional development stage. We knew where they should be, and we knew that they should probably be further along than they were, but we also knew why they weren't. And so the biggest things, we looked at were patterns of cooperation and conflict resolution. They need much more time in general to develop and to be observed to give an accurate assessment of the value of the SEL interventions. And this is a really short study at 6 weeks. And improvements in self and social awareness were observed on an individual basis, but not markedly as a whole group. And then finally, knowing that the students in this study were being invited to reflect on these issues of self and social awareness, really probably for the first time, and were only beginning to find their way during this study, that 6-week period, again, just so short, that this is really just the beginning of their story, this study. So the assumptions and the targets of this study, we knew that cooperative learning techniques coupled with movement-based learning could be a really great recipe for success, especially with this age group. Helping students successfully navigate this time of social and physical growth, and the negative effects of the pandemic on their social and academic experiences. The main things that we hope to see out of the students were increased self and social awareness, increased acceptance of peers, stronger collaborative learners, and stronger interpersonal skills. And we thought that movement-based learning would really help us get there. So my research question was, what effect does combining movement, cooperative learning strategies, and SEL lessons focused on collaborative learning and conflict resolution skills have on 5th grade students' abilities to demonstrate positive social and interpersonal skills and positive conflict resolution? Sorry, I'm gonna get to the next slide here. So the review of literature, the big areas that I looked at, one was why social and emotional learning in elementary school kids is so vital. Secondly, with my Montessori background, I brought in Maria Montessori's 4 Planes of Human Development to really help understand where 5th graders were and where they were trying to go, kind of what was next for them. I looked a lot at the connections between movement and cognition and the powerful role that they play in the process of learning. And that continues to be a research area for me that's really fascinating. I looked a lot at physical literacy, not a term we hear a lot, but something really important, and the importance of kids learning how to be literate in their physical selves as early as possible and what that does for their learning. And then finally, the connections between cooperative learning and SEL and really how to capitalize on those. So the methods and procedures I used to collect data, really students had movement and SEL class with me 1 time a week for 45 minutes, and it was either in the gym or it was outside depending on weather. The main tools that I used to collect data were student pre and post surveys, staff observations, and researcher observations of the students during class, in passing periods, and on the yard during lunch and recess. The quantitative data collected included self-reports by students of their comfort levels with collaborative and cooperative learning techniques, trust in classmates, and confidence in their abilities to constructively resolve conflicts. And qualitative data collected included researcher comments and observation notes, in addition to students' pre and post survey answers regarding their understanding of and willingness to participate in cooperative learning strategies. Lesson plans were also collected. This is how I do it. I'm a chicken scratcher. So I collected all my lesson plans that documented the number of times classes met, the length of the lessons, the type of the activities that we did, and really just helped me be able to go back and piece it all together. Pre and post survey answers were compared to determine the number and percent of students who showed an increase or decrease in the understanding of and ability to demonstrate cooperative learning strategies and attitudes, as well as student self-reflections on group work and kind of group attitudes. Researcher observations included notes about general class interactions, strategies used by students, and interactions between students. Other staff observation notes were taken from general observations and student support calls through the 6-week period. Everything was evaluated for patterns, increases or decreases in specific behaviors, and just kind of general observations in general of that group of students. The findings in this research study ultimately showed that students had varied responses to and reflections on the lessons in cooperative learning and SEL. There were really no major changes across the board, but some changes in sections and specific questions, and certainly in some individual cases. Again, this 6-week intervention period just wasn't enough time. Overall observations over the course of the study indicated that the 5th grade class struggled really from the start of school with rude, mean, and even bullying behavior, and didn't show a lot of improvement over the course of this study. It showed not much change in the data in terms of skills or confidence gained. Really, the most notable findings from the student surveys in particular showed a decrease across the board in terms of students' perception of their class's ability to work together, which was disappointing, but also wasn't very surprising given the kind of nature of the climate and what we saw the students going through at the time. In the final 2 weeks of the study, additional SEL interventions were needed in the students' health and human development class that was being taught. It was being taught fairly unsuccessfully because of like rude and disrespectful student behavior. And so the school counselor and myself ended up taking half of that class for half of the period and focusing on really explicit SEL teachings. And the thing that we started with was the mood meter and really looking at emotion regulation and emotion recognition. And the findings from the observations in these 2 lessons that we had were some of the most marked and valuable in the study. It wasn't a part of the initial research plan, but it really became an important lever in reaching this group and making student-teacher connections and seeing students' willingness to kind of exhibit some vulnerability in a group setting. So the limitations, you've already heard me mention the 6-week period a couple times. But the narrow intervention period really was the biggest thing I think that got in the way for me on this, and the constant changing of the student cohorts. Those made it really difficult for us to create any cohesion, and those were really the 2 biggest limiting factors. We also had kind of other SEL interventions happening, which always makes it difficult to ascertain, for sure which interventions were having which impacts. And additionally, patterns of cooperation and conflict resolution need more time in general to develop and be observed to give an accurate assessment of whether these interventions are working or not. But knowing that in SEL development, self-awareness will emerge first, awareness of others along with it, but that self-management, that attention to intentional relationship building and the capacity to make responsible decisions, it takes longer to develop. And this study really just kind of scratched the surface of where this group is headed and probably what's driving them there. But knowing that they were being invited to reflect on this stuff really for the first time, overall, they just weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for this level of collaboration and cooperative learning at their current developmental level with SEL. And COVID did have a lot to do with that. That 3rd and 4th grade year for them did not set them up, really for a whole lot of success as 5th graders in this area. Really, at this time, the study's still unfolding and it's still working itself out. So future research, again, I mentioned movement. That's a huge thing for me. I love looking at movement and how it affects kids and which competency and at what time and what kind of movement. So that's future research for me. Our recommendation at the end of this was ongoing assessments at our school in particular. And we were able to do that this year. We put in January, we did our first SEL assessment, and we're in the process right now of doing our second SEL assessment. So that's really great. And ongoing, formative assessments just throughout the year to really let us know what's working and what's not, what's having an impact. And then the third thing is bringing in that cross-content work and project-based learning. There's such a great marriage to SEL, and I think those are our biggest focuses for moving forward. And that's all I got. My email there if anyone or wants to reach out. So I hope that was helpful. All right, cool. Thanks, Dr. C.
We're giving you a round of applause. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And we know that you are making a ripple effect with so many of your colleagues at your school as you continue to pursue SEL and integrating it very purposefully. We next have a presentation from Leanne Cabot. Leanne Cabot is the founder of the 5 Seasons of Connections. She also is an author and has produced a book based on her research using the small group of adolescents that she worked with as subjects, and they co-wrote the book with her. So it's really fantastic information that you're about to hear. So go ahead and take it away, Leanne.
Thanks so much for joining me to explore the impact of SEL strategy testing on stress levels and self-awareness in a small group of adolescents. I know it's the end of the day, but I really appreciate you being here. So I'm an education consultant, and one of my clients asked me to solve the biggest problem in her college counseling business. She had 11 students to guide through their college application process, but they were disengaged, disinterested, and defeated in everything academic. Again, COVID did not do any favors for this group either. Her students were not unique in their struggle to care about or complete even the easiest of tasks. Over the past 3 years, dozens of studies highlight the mental health crisis for teens, which was absolutely exacerbated by COVID-19. This chart shows only one sliver of the issue. In 2009, 26% of teens felt persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. In 2022, that number had jumped to 44%. While all childhood is precious for healthy brain development, adolescence is a critical time for mental health. Research shows that certain mental disorders like anxiety and depression peak at age 14 and a half, yet emotional regulation skills don't typically mature until someone is 25. For adolescents who have experienced trauma, discrimination, have medical challenges, or are neurodivergent, their emotional regulation age of maturity may be higher. Adolescents without SEL skills find themselves in a spiral of stress where small things become big things. Because they don't know how to identify their emotions, understand their needs, or select the most effective strategies to support their mental health as efficiently as possible, their stress grows and they spiral downwards towards dysregulation, which in this group presents as worry, overwhelm, panic, agitation, and anxiety. The second graphic shows the ideal response to stressors we're trying to move them towards. Here, a small event occurs, and they can leverage their increased self-awareness and strengthen stress management skills to acknowledge, assess, and process their emotions around the event to return to a state of emotional regulation. For my action research project, I set out to discover which social and emotional activities best assist this population in reducing stress and developing self-awareness. As teens are a unique demographic with specific needs and desires, living with rising familial and societal restrictions and limitations, the program needed to meet their specific needs. I designed a 5-month extracurricular program called the Impact Project to test and rank 18 different evidence-based, stress-reducing, self-awareness building social and emotional strategies with 11 high school students. We had 6 boys, 5 girls, ages 15 to 18. I found they had a dire need for 3 specific elements: SEL instruction, stress management strategies, and building self-awareness. The review of relevant literature showed the highest SEL priority in schools is for the youngest students, reflected in the fact that all 50 states have SEL education standards for toddlers and young children, but not teens. However, studies from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, and education experts show adolescents absolutely require targeted and age-appropriate SEL support because their family relationships and friendships are becoming more complex, romantic relationships are developing, peer pressures increase, hormonal changes soar, and academic demands intensify. To create a balanced experiment, I selected 4 categories to organize the 18 strategies: mindfulness, positivity, physical activity, and connection to others. Each category was assigned 4 or 5 activities, which I called challenges. And I wanted to have several challenges in each category to increase the quality of the study. For example, if I only had one physical activity, say yoga, and students didn't like yoga, I might think they didn't like physical activity, but in fact, they might just not have liked yoga. While many of the challenges could be assigned to several categories, I tried to stay true to the outcome to determine the category placement. I also tried to evenly distribute activities in each category across the full 18-week period to account for different peaks and valleys in the student's stress due to various academic scheduling demands like midterms, AP testing, SATs, finals, as well as academic breaks in the spring and summer. All of the challenges were selected to bring opportunities to increase self-awareness and teach and measure strategies to decrease stress and overwhelm. Some of the challenges were selected in direct response to answers received in the first data instrument I created, the assessment questionnaire. A sample of some of the questions are on this slide, and participants answered the exact same questionnaire before, during, and after the 18-week study. The biggest source of data came from instrument number 2, the daily challenge tracking sheets. Every challenge required the students to rank the effectiveness on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most effective in either developing self-awareness or reducing stress. Because challenges could be done quickly and easily, the participants were asked to complete them twice a day. In this sample, you can see that this participant ranked Create a Joy List most effective and Stretching Yoga as least effective for their mental health and well-being. I have this data for every challenge, 6 days a week, for 18 weeks from all 11 participants. The second largest data set came from a weekly reflection questionnaire. So every Saturday when the participants submitted their daily tracking sheets, they also answered free response questions. This slide shows a sample of the questions and answers. As these submissions were not numerical, they required coding and thematic design, which we'll talk about shortly. Collecting data can be a challenge, especially from teens who are already stressed, overworked, and overwhelmed. I was able to get so much data because we built a tight-knit community from the start, and together we were going to solve a big problem they all faced. By creating a positive, student-centered, experiment-focused environment, participants wanted to share. I created all of the instruments to collect the data, and as this chart shows, it amounted to nearly 12,000 pieces of data in all forms. With this much data, I have limitless ways to organize and interpret the results. Here's one way. Did they see an increase in positive experiences and a decrease in negative experiences? The 3 bars represent the pre-assessment, mid-assessment, and post-assessment responses. In the top section, you can see satisfaction increased over the course of the program, and this sample shows they developed more gratitude, had better quality of relationships, and a more positive mindset by the end. In the bottom section, you can see they reported less negatively over time in response to questions that painted a bleaker picture, indicating they felt less bleakness by the end of the program. Don't panic. We're going to dive into the results. So the 4 categories are listed and color-coded on the left: mindfulness, positivity, physical activity, and connection to others. The combined ranking is in the middle, and then the large chart on the right is the customized ranking per participant, where the girls are under the pink headings and the boys are under the blue. In the chart titled Total Combined Ranking, you can see Be in Nature as one of the challenges ranked highest when combining everybody's measurements. But when we looked at the customized chart, we see all the girls chose that first, but only 1 boy did. 2 boys ranked Connecting to Others as their top challenge, 2 ranked Physical Activities first. We could deconstruct this chart for days, but you'll get to explore this chart on your own. In our time together, we can't see how age, gender, and socioeconomic status impacted the results, although I did that for my study. What I did want to mention, though, is family placement, because I think this little studied factor absolutely impacts stress, especially in this demographic, because when we consider high school students, We have to think of the family expectations on teens, the levels of responsibility in their families as well. No one is just a student. So here you can see everyone ranked being in nature as their top choice for de-stressing. However, oldest children ranked guided meditation second, sharing it was because they often have to parent younger siblings and they lost their tempers. Youngest children, however, ranked how others see me second because they worry about fitting in. Numerical data is relatively easy to process, but there were over 400 written reflections and short answers, which were much more complex to process. So I read through them multiple times to listen to the story that the responses were trying to tell me. And through the process of collecting, sorting, coding, organizing, and understanding the 12,000 pieces of data, 4 themes emerged to help me tell the story in my research project. 1, the participants benefited with increased fluency in mental health literacy. 2, they had improved focus and function. 3, they had increased levels of self-care. And 4, a deepening of their relationship to others. This slide lists the positive outcomes that the participants experienced throughout the study. The Impact Project began to help a small group of highly stressed, overwhelmed students build self-awareness and develop social and emotional skills to navigate the heavy demands of their academic and personal lives. In the end, each student had a tested and curated selection of 18 new stress management strategies to help them weather any metaphorical storm. Additionally, every student reported increased self-confidence, self-management, a higher satisfaction in their relationships, and stronger social skills, as well as efficient and responsible decision-making. So even though I only targeted growth and self-awareness, all 5 CASEL competencies were strengthened. The future research options are listed on the right. The transformation was huge. In the beginning, my students used words like exhausted, cry, insecure, disorganized, anxious, and pressure. After 5 months together, their word choice changed to words like accomplished, focused, motivated, confident, and happier. While I believe teaching SEL skills to our youngest students to build a strong foundation is vital, social and emotional growth and development should not stop there. Adolescents who are navigating some very big and daunting life experiences benefit enormously from SEL exploration and integration, as the Impact Project demonstrated. These students experienced all this positive growth and expansion and wanted to share their experience. So I coached them through the process of documenting their journey in narrative form, and we self-published our co-authored book about our study in August last year called Teens Talk About Mental Health. Readers all over the world are using our challenges to chart their own path to better mental health and wellness. SEL has given my students and their readers extraordinary gifts that will last a lifetime. Thank you so much for your time and attention as I shared my research, and I think we're all open to questions now.
Once again, round of applause. Thank you so much, Leanne. What an in-depth study and such an important one in knowing how stress can impact our youth today. Dr. Bertrando, do you want to go ahead and discuss a little bit? And if there's anyone who has burning questions, this is the time to do it.
Sure. So HASMEC introduced some studies with their preschoolers to really prove that they can be introduced to mindfulness and that they can actually be able to self-manage their skills. She did scaffolding approaches that were hands down practical for educators to be able to implement in their classrooms. And they actually address things, preventative measures that we can think about moving forward to kind of promote practices within our K through 12 systems as well. And then Stacy also addressed how movement can really improve and also introduce interactive SEL strategies for our students as well. In particular, she talked about the progression of development within our students too, that they have to be self-aware first, awareness of others to be able to be cooperative learners. So that was a real key opener, key aha to me as well. And also addressing the ramifications of COVID that's really had on our students and our educational progress for our kids right now. And Leanne also introduced about how she could really address that camaraderie with her group of students. I mean, think about how adolescents could really talk about and engage and really have deep conversations about social emotional, a competence they have going on right now, and how she addressed the schema of the categories and giving them choices of the schema of categories and giving me choices or challenges in order to prove or be able to address that, to learn those skills is amazing. And then just kind of moving forward, that's going to really help them through adulthood as well. So kudos to you guys.
I'd like to know what
Well
plans
done.
are for replicating your research, sharing your research, and possibly having someone else replicate for you. What are your thoughts about that? This is a question to all of you.
Anybody could replicate my study. It is, outlined in the book, and all of my research is very well documented. So I think anybody could take it and run it again. I am planning on running this exact program with a different group of adolescents. We'll start this fall. And so I really am going to look at not only the differences between the groups that we have, but also just, what might be some other variables like culture or geographic location or, socioeconomic levels, to see if there are other things that could play into mental health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. And Leanne, also, we had discussed looking at the cultural connection of your population, since they predominantly were from Korean families. And
Yeah.
even though family placement was a variable, I believe that the pressure from the parents was overwhelming, and traditionally that is very common among Korean families. And I don't know if there are any Koreans in our group today, but you can see that, that there's a lot of pressure, especially with IB students, AP students, and our youth today are under a lot of stress.
The parents actually presented to the kids if they wanted to pull out to study more, they could do that. The parents would support them leaving the program, and every student for 18 weeks was just like, no, this is where I have to be. I think it was their one release of some of the stress that they feel in other parts of their life. So it became a really huge community source for them, just for a little bit of breathing space, for sure.
Stacy, have you replicated your study with anyone else?
I haven't, and I think what I want to do is do it again next year. I really want to start the school year with this under my belt and be able to do it from the start to the finish and get a full 9 months in there. And I think at that point, that feels replicable to me. And that feels like easy to hand over and say, yeah, let's see what this looks like in a different setting with a different school. Because our demographic is pretty specific, and it's, I'd love to see it somewhere else for sure.
Wonderful. Hasmik, you have 1 minute to share your thoughts about replication.
I also want to continue. I want to continue my study, implementing it in a different classroom, in a new classroom with a bigger number of subjects. And I actually signed up for my Breathe for Change summer cohort to get certified in mindfulness. Wow. So I would implement more mindfulness activities with my next cohort of students. And I have all the literature, everything ready, lesson plans, everything, but I want to enhance the experiences in mindfulness and see how it works further.
Once again, congratulations to all of you. We're going to go into the back to the main session in just a second. So I wanted to thank you again all for taking time, those who presented as well as those who attended. I hope you were able to glean some new ideas and some new ahas about strategies and implementation of social and emotional learning in the K-12 classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.